So here's the thing. This video is gonna be very different from what I usually make, because in this video I'm showing you this gorgeous, absolutely beautiful environment, which is a street that you can get in marketplace for free. Now I'm showing this to you because I'm just gonna, I'm playing this right now, and I would love that because for my new game, I need to have a beautiful street like this, right? With the street shops and stores and stuff like that. The problem with that is that this is 11 gigabytes. You heard me. 11 gigabytes, right? So 11 gigabytes. I want to make a game for Android or kind of a lo-fi Windows. So it's like I can't have something which is 11 gigabytes that works for a console like a PS5 or a PC or something, not for Android. And let's say, by the same token, I want something which is kind of tricking, because what's happening in my game is that I need a street with all these street signs, and because in my new game I'm gonna have stores, and there's gonna be interaction with the stores. But as I said, I need that to be 100 gigabyte, 100 gigabyte, 100 megabytes. And the thing about 100 megabytes is that how can you get a beast like this for 100 megabytes? Well, it's not going to be possible. But there are tricks, right? And so I thought, okay, I don't really know what kind of tricks is that. Now I have a friend who's an amazing game designer, and he tells me you can do pretty sophisticated city structure in Blender and kind of can fool the system, right? Because all I care is really a street. But I just wanted to show you that that's what my new game is gonna be about. It's gonna be this thing about, I'm gonna have like this beautiful or something sort of semi-decent street with these different different storefronts, and then but I'm gonna figure out what kind of a trick, or what several kind of tricks can I use to actually make that for 100 megabytes. That's like, and I thought that would be part of the videos that I will be making. The other thing that you need to consider is that you got to consider is that it's not only the huge 11 gigabyte size, but also the processing, right? The processing on a small Android phone, how much processing power there is. Very little processing power compared to like a PS5 or a computer or something. So like, as you can see, this even has animation of like leaves falling off. You can't have that. You can't, even if you did that and you had the super amazing phone, you can't even see that. So it would be wasted. So I'm gonna go through the process of elimination and see how much of this stuff can I eliminate and still have some kind of a decent thing, right? Or at least semi-decent or something. I mean, let's kick around some ideas, right? Like this thing, we don't need this thing, right? We can delete this thing, or these things, or like that, right? So those are things that you can just plain delete. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect. But what about like a building like this, right? The thing about this is that a building like this is made of so many different things, right? So if I like delete that right now, what happens, right? So that part goes away, and you can see behind it, right? Um, and like, what if I delete this, right? So the idea is that there are so many thousands or hundreds of pieces in this, right? So like this thing here, if I delete that, okay, that whole thing went away. But like, even these trees, right? This tree, if I delete that, okay, but that tree itself is gonna have, it's gonna be a huge thing. It's gonna have textures, and it's gonna have, it's gonna have so many polygons. And what would be the trick? Like, so I already, in my old game, I got like low poly trees. So I can replace that tree with low poly trees. But the problem is really the buildings, right? Because these buildings are made of so many polys, right? So many polygons. And so the trick that I would be using is that, how can I do something that this is really not all these pieces, because I don't really need these pieces. All I need is just like a flat surface that doesn't really have, like, even if you like go in here and look at this, you see that it has texture, right? And this texture, that's expensive, right? That's expensive. I don't need that. So the point is, the trick is, what do I do? What do I do? How do I replace all of this stuff, or kind of find a trick to replace these beautiful textures and buildings with basically images, with basically flat 2D images? Because there's not going to be an interaction with these things, right? So I'm going to start the game just gonna, so we can, go around and look at these things, right? But like, if you go to this, like, yes, it's beautiful, and look, there is even, you see that there is even glass, it has mirror qualities. I mean, that's amazing, right? To have that kind of a thing, that it's a glass and has mirrors. And we don't really need that. I don't need that level of detail. I need, basically what I need is something which is basically 100 megabytes, not 11 gigabytes. So that's like 100 times smaller or something, or pretty much something like that. And then the processing power would not be there. And so another thing is that, as you see these beautiful shadows, right? None of that stuff can, work with the processing power. You can't have that in an Android phone. So I'm gonna stop this. I mean, we can even talk about the ground, right? The floor. This floor itself is kind of complex. So if I delete that, I mean, it doesn't have to be so complex. It's got a texture, it's got a color, it's got this, it's got that. We don't need that to be so complex, right? And I'm not even sure, we can probably like look at how many, you see this, I'm scrolling, you see how many different how many different polygons and everything is being used in this thing. I mean, it's insane, how many things are being used. And so the trick, that I will be making videos more about, that is that, how do I go about that, right? What do I do? How do I get some kind of a semi-decent thing to look not horrible, I'm not saying like look good, but be super cheap, and not only be super cheap, also be, in terms of size and in terms of file size, but also it doesn't need processing power. And again, my friend says that can be done with Blender. I don't know how to use Blender, so I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to see, what kind of a trick can I do to actually um, turn these things, turn these sophisticated things into simple boxes that are super cheap, and maybe put some kind of a super cheap background on it, nothing really textury, because when you're dealing with Android and when you're dealing with mobile and when you want to make something which is not very expensive for the computer, it doesn't require a computer, you have to deal with things like um, uh, file size and processing power. There's no two ways about it. And you look, I mean, this is pretty big environment, right? Like, I don't really need something like that, right? It's look at that you see how far it goes and how many buildings there are. And in my game I have a few stores, and even look, there's even look, there is beautiful mountains and trees, and this is gorgeous. This is absolutely gorgeous. Like, if it was a GTA 6, of course we would have much more sophisticated than this. This is just a little neighborhood, right? But when you're making an Android game, you want to make a game which can be under 300 megs, like my first game, and also you want to make a game which can be run on a phone, as in that requires that little processing power. You don't need such a big operation. You don't need such a big project with so many look at these streets again. It's pretty sophisticated, right? You don't need that. Look, then there we have even different textures, and look, the street here, like, yes, this is 11 gigabytes, but not needed for me, right? Like, if you run around here and go around town, look at all these textures, these beautiful textures. And look, there is look, you can see my image in the window. That's beautiful, but I don't need that. That is absolutely 100% not needed. And so what we need to do, what I'm gonna do, is find ways to make this simple to the nth degree, right? That goes from 11 gigabytes to 100 megabytes, and that it doesn't use such fancy textures, that it uses like one texture, and that texture, even the sky, you see that even the sky is pretty complex here. And so you don't want to do that, not for an Android game. So you don't want to have that kind of sophisticatedness. You just want something that can pass for a street, basically. So I just thought I make this video to talk about this, like, this project that I'm doing. It's not a small thing, because I want to do a semi-decent street, and I don't know Blender, and the thing about it is that the thing about it is that I don't know Blender, and it's there are low poly solutions, but they don't look very good. And also there are low poly good solutions which cost money type thing, but I don't have the money. My games are free, so I'm not gonna do that. So the trick is, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna have a street, and then maybe copy that street over, and when I copy that street over, you know basically use a few things and get this idea, like, look at this beautiful corner and these awnings and all that stuff, and that's great, but that's not what I need. I need something super simple with textures that are super simple, um, and then I need to repeat that. And honestly, I don't have a clue how I am gonna do that. So this video was just an introduction to what I'm gonna be doing, what I'm doing right now. This is what, I have the script for my new game, and I have an idea what I'm gonna do, but this street is basically the meat and potato of my game. And without figuring out how to do the street, and because I'm doing a mobile game, or a game that can be very cheap for Windows and it doesn't need a complex computer, I'm gonna really need to figure out how to fake a beautiful environment without using Blender, since I don't know how to use Blender, and also without buying stuff which could be cool, but I don't have the money to buy low poly environment. And then also I've never done that. I've never created an environment. My first game was simply in a forest, but this is happening in a city. And doing this in a city, I need to really figure out how am I gonna do this environment. And I thought I make this video, the first video that I'm making, because I want to show you guys my process. And I don't really have a process yet. I have no idea what I'm gonna do, but this video was just a simple introduction to what am I up against and what I'm gonna do. It's not a small thing, and the thing about it is that of course it would be lovely if I could make something like that, right? Make buildings like that, and but I can't do that. And even if I could totally use this thing because it's free, this marketplace neighborhood, but as I said, it's 11 gigabytes. So what kind of a trick can I do? And of course, I didn't, as I said, these are shadows, and I can't have this kind of a dynamic lighting or something. This is super fancy stuff, and like chairs, and look at all that detail there, right? Like there's this chair, and even the chair itself and the table. So there is so much details in this game that it's in this environment that my game doesn't need, and they all need to go. And I will be making several videos as to what kind of a trick I would be using to remove what, and still have like a semblance of a neighborhood.